Hey everyone, welcome back to Best Show Ever Pod, the podcast where we talk about the best concert that people ever saw in their life. I'm Cam, I'm your host, and we have got a really cool episode this week with another Osiris podcast host of multiple podcasts. I've got Megan Glionna on the podcast this week. Megan is the co-host of Things of Gold Pod with Ryan Storm. She's also a co-host on Helping Friendly podcast with RJ and a bunch of other cool co-hosts. Megan has seen some really, really sweet shows, specifically Phish shows. And we do talk about Phish. We talk about 90s Phish. We talk about Phish of the day. We talk about 90s Phish and the Phish of the day. We span eras. We talk about legacies. We talk about Goose. We talk about boy bands. We talk about the aesthetics of the 90s and the early 2000s. And we get a little bit into seeing shows now that you've become an adult, now that you've got kids and things like that, and how to carry that through. Really, really great conversation with Megan. So I will not bore you with any more intro. Sit back and relax and enjoy this conversation with Megan. But first, enjoy a little bit of music from none other than Jesus and Fartfinger.
This is the best show ever. This is the best show ever. This is the best show ever. This is the best show.
Best show I ever heard.
I think I'd have to agree.
Yeah.
But
Awesome. I can't wait.
yeah. So your parents, were they jam band people back in the day, or were they or have you turned them on to it?
A little bit of both. They were hippies. So my dad went to Woodstock when he was in high school to protest the Vietnam War, but ended up in this like giant party, um and so they were really into music. I grew up on like 70s rock, like Emerson, Lake and Palmer and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, Fleetwood Mac. Like that's what was playing in my house growing up. A lot of classic rock. And so they were never into the Dead though. Like my dad watched the Long Strange Trip with me, that movie, that like 100-year hour long movie or whatever. And he was like, this, I don't know how I missed the Dead. Like I just did, it just never was kind of like put in front of him. But yeah, he's kind of into the Dead, but not really. But I think they've been to one Phish show. They went to July 21st, 1997. I took them to, which is like that famous show. Yeah, with the storm in Raleigh. I was on tour doing like a mini summer tour and brought them to that show because they lived in Raleigh, North Carolina then. And all my friends crashed at their house and they like made food for us and they came to the show. And I put them on the lawn and they had like ponchos and it started raining. And I was like, so you guys stay here. I'm just going to go down to the pavilion with my friends. And like, I
Right.
danced to the pavilion and like had the best time. And my parents, like, they sat it out the whole show in the rain and they were total sports about it. And yeah, now they're into Trey. No, they like Tab a lot. And now they like Goose. So now they're like into it. Like my dad had never been to Red Rocks, had always wanted to go. And so he flew out for the Trey shows. And
Wow.
it was like the best experience for him. And he was so into it. He loves horns. He loves that full sound that Tab has. And so, yeah, he's a Trey guy. I mean, I can't blame him.
What can you say? I'm totally on board with that. I'm a sucker for a horn section. And I don't know what it is about Trey band that does appeal a little bit more to like my folks too. Like when it comes up
Mhm.
on their they still listen to Pandora. They're still like they are like slaves to Pandora. And so like when it comes up, they're like, oh, I like this. Because
Yeah.
they like Tedeschi Trucks. They're like heads for Tedeschi Trucks. They're like on tour.
My parents
Um,
love Tedeschi trucks too. So
they're
it
all
is,
over it.
I think that's like Tab is like a more approachable, like whenever people are like, play me Fish, I'm like, let's start with Tab. Like it's a little bit more
Yeah.
songy. It's a fuller kind of like, big band sound. I think it's not as like weird. There's not you're not going to be playing for them and all of a sudden you're going to end up in like Contact and you're going to have to like explain it. It's like, it's
Yeah.
not going to end up there like with Tab. So I think there's like a crossover of that.
Yeah, the lyrics are a little more accessible and like a little less goofy. Like my dad is down for goofy. Like he's a big Zappa. guy, and so
Oh,
he'll listen
nice. Yeah.
to, you know, the weirdest cuts and everything, and my mom does not do Zappa, but she loves, like, blues music, and she, like, loves Stevie Ray Vaughan and, like, all that kinda stuff, and so whenever Trey gets, like, bluesy, like, I'll give her, like, a 46 Days or something, and she'll be like, "I love this. This is
Yeah.
great."
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
that's definitely like kind of that, yeah, like the Tedeschi Trucks, like bluesy, kind of like soul, kind of like folky stuff. Yeah. My parents are super into that too. They love them. They're always trying to like push Susan Tedeschi on me. And I'm like, I just really haven't listened to it, but I should.
Have you been to a show?
No.
You gotta see Derek Trucks and well, and
I
Susan
know,
Stench. You gotta see 'em both. I
right?
mean, they really are, like, pretty phenomenal, and the crowd does, like, sit down, and it is like it's not, like, the same scene that we're used to, but they're pretty good.
Yeah,
They're
they're
pretty good.
really good. And I loved listening to that. What was it? When did Derek Trucks play with Trey and they played like Layla? When was that? That was like at
Lincoln
Lock-In?
Festival. Yeah.
Yeah, I listened to that a lot. And I loved Susan sang on what did she sing? Which Trey song did she sing on? One of the new ones, one of the Ghost of the Forest ones. And it was like so beautiful. And I
Ooh,
hear her voice like every time I hear that song now. What is it? I'll remember it. But yeah.
I'm blanking on it too, but she's got pipes. She really
Oh,
brings,
that's so
the muscle on the
good.
vocals for sure. Derek Trucks, no vocals, not even talking.
No? It's really
Zero.
he's super quiet?
He doesn't say a word. He doesn't even really look up from his guitar the whole time. He's
Really?
just kinda he's just kinda in his
He's one
own
of
world,
those
and
guys.
Susan Tedeschi is the front woman for that band for
Well, it
sure.
seems like that's all they need is just one, right?
That's right. They
Yeah.
don't need they don't need all that.
No. Oh, and it was A Life Beyond the Dream.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
She
her
really
singing on that, it's, like, amazing.
man, this is gonna be my parents' favorite episode. They're gonna be like, Yes. Yes."
I think your parents need to take me to the Tedeschi Trucks band show. I think I'm saying that wrong. That's hard for me to say. Tedeschi? Am I doing it right?
It's Tedeschi. No,
Tedeschi.
it's
Well,
it's
that
it
ma
no, it's
now I know why I'm saying it wrong. It's not that hard, I'm just struggling.
Well, so we're gonna get into your best show. We're gonna get into some of your best shows, but before we get into those, I like to do first and worst show.
Yeah.
So what was the first concert and the worst concert that you ever went to?
Okay, so the first concert that I ever went to, and I'm a little annoyed because I'm gonna really age myself here, but it was
Sure.
New Kids on the Block.
Oh my God.
Yep, it was
Unbelievable.
Hangin' Tough. You got the right stuff, baby. Yeah,
Yes.
it was that. It was New Kids on the Block. It was 1989. We drove from my home in Grand Rapids, Michigan to Clarkston, Michigan, outside of Detroit for the Hangin' Tough tour. And this tour was kind of cool because originally it started with they were opening for Tiffany, who was a big like girl person then. And because the New Kids was so popular, they ended up like headlining, and then she ended up opening for them at all the shows. So by the time I jumped
Man.
on the tour, she was opening for them with her like cool like hand dancing that she did during the Beatles cover of I Think We're Alone Now. And it was cool.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, Tiffany's cool. Like, this is great. And I remember I wore like this huge vest because I was a Jordan girl. And if you know anything about New Kids on the Block, Jordan was like the lead guy and he wore this oversized, like printed vest. And of course, I had one. And
Oh,
I
man.
remember like turning to my mom and my friend and being like, listen, I really hate it when people like scream. Like when I see concerts on TV and everybody's like screaming and going crazy, like just be quiet when the artist comes out and like get ready for them. And then they, came out and I saw Jordan and I just screamed my head
Yeah.
off. Like I was just like, yes, Jordan. So that was my first show. It was amazing and I loved it.
You went in as a pro. You're like, "Listen, like, just control yourself in the concert. Like, it's relax and just watch the presentation." But then the fever took hold.
Exactly. You cannot resist a boy band, not when you're like,
No.
11 years old. You can't.
No. You seen him in magazines, you saw him on MTV, and all of a sudden there he is in the big vest, and so it's like,
you can't help but go crazy. He had a rat tail, like, forget it. He had
Oh,
everything.
come on. He had every man, that's all you needed back then was a rat
That's all you
tail
needed. A rat tail, a swoop hair, and like a really big clothing that did not fit.
and sweet moves.
And some really good moves. Yeah. I mean, I'm gonna bring some of those out in Fish Tour this summer. Some of those like hanging tough
Yeah.
moves. Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, and those guys kinda paved the way for, like, the boy band craze that is huge when I'm a kid, like, with NSYNC. I was a big NSYNC kid. I There's
You
actually a
were?
picture of me, and I will find it. I had friends who they had older sisters that were trying to, like, meet NSYNC, and so there was, like, a Garnier Fructis, like, contest, and it was like, come up with the funniest NSYNC video, and you get to meet NSYNC, and so these girls, like, got their little brother and all of his friends, and they're like, "We're gonna dress you guys up like NSYNC, and we're
No
gonna do a
way.
music video." And I was Lance Bass, um,
Amazing. I mean,
and I had
perfect.
silver hair. It was kind of the first video I ever did, really. Of
Do you still have it?
there's definitely a picture, that my mom keeps because she thinks it's, like, the best. I'm in, like, a Seattle Supersonics jersey, and I'm, like, kinda posting up, like,
That's
Lance Bass style.
amazing. Did you do like a dance?
Oh, yeah, we went to, like,
Oh,
a school
wow.
gym that was, like, empty, and we, like, you know,
You did like the one where they're like, is that the one where they're like puppets or something?
"It's
Or is
gonna be May."
Nay. Yes.
Yeah,
That's
so
so good.
and I don't know, in the, like, the, New Kids on the Block kinda era, was there a rival? Because I was like I hated Backstreet Boys. I was like,
Oh, you
"Fuck
hated?
Backstreet." Yeah, I was like, they're not even real."
Right. I don't know. I mean, I think there was like Menudo, which was like,
Yeah,
but I don't know if they were rival. I can't remember the timing of it, but that's the only other boy band I can think of back then. But you know what? I was just about New Kids. I was a one band girl, just like you. I was only there for New Kids, just like you were there for NSYNC.
that's right,
I
that's
mean, I
right.
think you
We've
chose the
grown.
right one. I think you chose the right one. Anyway, I mean, Justin was clearly the most talented out of all of them.
Yeah, Backstreet Boys was like a knockoff. They were, like,
Yeah. Mm-mm.
weak, just weak. I don't know. And then I
Not as
yeah,
good. I
forget
agree.
about it. Also, there was probably, like, a girl it was, like, probably, like, the first girl I ever had a crush on, had, like, a NSYNC folder in class or something. I'm like, "NSYNC's the best.
Forget
NSYNC's
it.
easily the best."
It's done forever, sealed. Did you ever have like frosted tips or like wear like two earrings or anything?
I was puka shell. I didn't do 2
Oh,
earrings,
okay, okay.
and I was, like, the wall of hair gel. I would do, like, the
Yes.
little like, whatever this is, like, was kinda my hairstyle, and
It's
so
so good.
and
Yeah,
I
my brother had
transitioned
the two earrings. He had like the two cubic zirconiums that were like they would have been like 4 carats or something. Like it
yes,
was like so enormous. He pierced them himself. Yeah, it's a good look.
nice.
Hmm.
That early 2000s look, where you have, like, a fitted baseball cap that's, like, down like, you backwards and, like, down to here.
Exactly. Like you have this huge forehead because of it.
I can't show yeah, right. Man, those were looks. That's what you should be bringing back on tour this summer is some early 2000s looks. Those will be
Don't
good.
tempt me, Kim. I'm not afraid
Yeah.
of a theme for sure.
Yeah, go for it. What about the worst show you ever saw?
It's like really makes me feel bad to talk about it because it's a fish show and it's not even
No.
that bad. I know, but it's more like circumstantial. Like
Yeah,
it was like one of these things where so it was 2009 and it was they had only been back for like 3 months, not even.
right?
Yeah, I guess they've been back for 3 months at this point, and it was going to be my first show in 10 years because I didn't see any shows in 2.0. So I was really excited. I had a baby. I had like a 1-year old, and I was like, I just had this baby, but it's like a year old. I can go out. I can like party. I'm gonna go see Fish. I'm gonna take my husband. He's never been. It's gonna be like, I'm gonna go back on tour. Like it was like I was all excited. I was like ready to like re-enter the Fish universe. And then I found out I was pregnant. Yep.
Oh,
Found out I was pregnant
oh,
that
no.
week. Yeah. And I was
Oh,
like, oh, okay. So I'm not going to do this show like I've done every other Phish show in my life. I was like, okay, that's okay. It's cool. Like I'm older now. I can do like a more mature version of this show.
yeah,
So
I don't have to do
right.
drugs. I
No,
can be sober.
I can be sober at a Phish show.
Sure.
And so I was like, I can do that. Yeah. And my husband's like, I can't. So, I'm going to need some beers, like some solid beers. Like, I don't like fish. Like, I'm going to need a lot. So I'm like, well, you're going to love the lot. So we like go to the lot. It's Jones Beach. This is June 4th, 2009. And I'm like, we're going to go to the lot. And he was like, this place is heaven. I like heady beers. I like veggie burritos. He loved it. You had a couple beers, was feeling good. We go into the venue. And this is when Jones Beach was still a state park. So they were not selling alcohol inside the venue at that point in time.
Oh, no.
So, yeah. So we get in the show and he's like, oh, I'm sorry, what? I can't buy alcohol in here. And then it starts to torrentially downpour. The temperature drops by like 30 degrees. It's
No.
freezing and we're unprepared. I haven't been on tour in a while. I forgot that you like plan for stuff. You like have a plan. I did not. So I was freezing. I had to buy like a sweatshirt, like at the merch stand. I was like, I guess I'm buying a sweatshirt. It was like my husband got like sober and sober by the minute. We were like wet. Trey played Time Turns Elastic. I was like, I don't,
And that was
I don't.
that was the last straw.
I was like, I don't know. Just don't know. I wasn't like in the scene anymore. I wasn't listening to a lot of the stuff, the new stuff. Like I wasn't prepared for the show. I didn't have a lot of friends in the scene anymore. Like all my friends that I used to see shows with were like in my college friends. They didn't live in New York. So it just felt very I just felt like I was trying on something that didn't fit anymore. And it made me like really sad. And I still found moments I liked, of course, because it's Phish and they're amazing. But it wasn't the best show for me. I felt like the show really like didn't have a lot of flow, wasn't the best playing. It was kind of sad.
Hey, th- that's okay for a band who improvises. Sometimes there's gonna be nights and
Yes.
they were just coming back, and to be honest, some of those '09 and 2010 shows, there's some gems in there for
Hmm.
sure. There's some tough stuff in there, and so,
Yeah.
I I think the thing about not being prepared is funny though, because like, now I'll go to, like, other
Yeah.
shows with friends who don't see Phish shows, and they'll be like, "Wow, you're so, like you got all the stuff. You're, like, really prepared." I'm like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, because I the stuff that I go see, you need all your stuff with you. Like, you
You're
need to
like,
be
I'm a
prepared and ready to go."
professional. Just so you
Listen,
know, this is what I do. I go to shows and I do it right. Yeah.
I got snacks. I
Yeah.
got blankets, I got Cliff Bars, I got waters,
What do you
sealed.
need?
I
I,
got sunscreen. Listen, we're gonna have a good time because 'cause I'm prepared.
I'm not a noob, just so you know. Just so you know.
Oh, man, there's no way to, like there's no way you would have known beforehand that the venue wasn't selling alcohol, and, like, even just, like, 2 or 3 beers during the show probably would have made a difference for
Yeah.
your husband, but, like, I mean, that's a lot of just like your best show, your worst show, it's probably, like, a bunch of little things,
Yes,
that build
exactly. It
up,
adds
you know?
up. Yeah. And like, 3 hours of fish sober when you don't like fish in the rain, it's a lot. I've also taken him to a New Year's show. Like he saw the Petrichor New Year's, 5 hours of fish when you don't
Cool.
fish is a lot. It was cool. There was plenty of beer, so he had a great time. But, like it's a lot. It's a big ask. Fish is a lot. It's a lot to bring people to who aren't into it. But it's okay. We made it through. I still went back every year. I continued to see a show like once or twice a year, like even when I was like in that period in my life when I was like having young kids and the band was still getting back, getting their like kind of like wheels back on. So it didn't like deter me, but it was a bummer.
That's good to know though, that, some of my friends are having babies, like, right now, have brand new, fresh babies, and they're a little like, "Well, see you in another life. I'll never see you again. I'll
It
never
does
be able to
feel
do
like
anything
that.
ever again," and so I'll show them this episode and be like, "Look, there's hope.
Mhm. Yeah. And
You can even host a podcast about this stuff if you wanted to."
Yeah, and, like, when your kids get older, like, I don't even need to do anything for my kids anymore, like, they make dinner for me now, like, I'm totally done raising them, like, occasionally, there's,
Yeah,
like, a minor inconvenience, I have to, like, take them to the doctor or something, but otherwise, they're just, like, hanging out, doing their own thing, having fun, and now I get to do what I want, so there's definitely light at the end of
yeah,
the tunnel. Yeah.
that's great. That's really great. And it the thing of, like, bringing a friend to a show, like, a lot of my friends that I regularly see shows with don't live with me here in California, so, like, seeing Phish and seeing jam stuff out here in California has been a lot of, like, bringing a buddy who has never been,
Mhm.
or, like, bringing my girlfriend who has never been, and, like, they like music, but it's a brand new thing with a lot of inside jokes, and people have the quotes of the stuff on their t-shirts, and there's like all these different little rules of like you can't go to the bathroom right now, and like all that kind of stuff is going on, and they're just like I people go to concerts and they're like I feel like I was not prepared for this. And then there's that whole like that drive home too where you're like, so what'd you think of did you have any, like, highlights or no highlights? Cool. Yeah, I mean, yeah, no big deal. Either way, it's
It's
fine.
really hard to, like, rabidly love something and bring someone or share it with someone who's, like, lukewarm or not interested, like, because they like you, they'll do it, they're like,
Yeah,
"Oh, I like you, and so I'm gonna do it for you," and, my husband's been to, like, 5 Fish shows, and he's done it because I asked him to go with me, and he's like, "Of course," but does he go by choice? No, and it's because it's a lot, it's like a whole thing, it's like especially now, and I'm sure it's this way for you, like, when you're in the community and you're kind of engaged with the community and, you know, people, like, wanna connect with you and you wanna connect with people, it becomes such a big thing that it's, like, a lot to go with somebody who's, like that. Like, I talk a lot about with my girlfriends, like, when I met a bunch of, like, my girlfriends that I see shows with now, like, we met in the last, like, 5 years, like, meeting someone who moved upstairs from me and found out, like, I was a Fish fan, and then we connected, and meeting, like, my sister-in-law's friend who's like this huge Fish fan, and we connected, and so now we're like really good friends, and we go to see shows together, and we like travel together, and we're a little like girl gang, and it's so fun, and it's just like so great. But it's like when you think about like people who are the three of us talk a lot about like what it was like when we first started seeing shows together, and like we were anonymous, and we didn't like, I wasn't doing the podcast, and I wasn't like out there like connecting with the community in a way. And I love doing that. Like, that's been one of my favorite things about the podcast is like getting to meet so many people and like connecting with people on like Twitter. And even though like my daughter told me today that Twitter is dead or for old people, but I'm kind of new to Twitter because I guess I'm not hip, but I was explaining to her like that I like love connecting to people on Twitter and like making friends and like connecting through this community, and that's been like such a huge added bonus to me,
yeah.
with these shows now, is like feeling like part of something, something that I've done for so long, but that now I feel like I'm connected to in a different way. And so my friends and I are always saying, like, when we used to go to shows, we'd be like anonymous and we could be like, naughty and like do things that nobody would
Yeah.
really know. And now it's like I'm always kind of like, oh no, like that person is kind of acting like an asshole. Like, don't do anything around me. Like, I don't want people to think I'm an asshole and like put it on Twitter. I'm like, I'm nervous
Oh,
about it.
I'm going through that too. I really am. Like at these recent Fish shows. First of all, like my little brother is a huge Fish fan, and so is my older brother. And going to shows with him, he's like, now people will be like, "Hey, I saw your
Yeah.
freaking little TikTok thing," and he'll be like, Uh, he doesn't it's not like we're doing anything that's not okay, but he
Right.
just doesn't, like, wanna be seen, and I also,
Yeah.
like, kinda didn't really think about that. I didn't think
I didn't
about that,
either.
like, like, how things could like, people could notice you and then, like, see you during the show. I never thought about that, but, because it is really, like, a thing that I use to go and have fun and get in touch with myself, and, um it's truly just recreation, and it's also, like, a big just a big part of who I am. I love live music, and they do it Fish does it the best. So,
Yes.
it's like church of live music for me. Uh-oh, cult talk. But
100%, 100% church. I mean, and that's like exactly what I wanted to like. I was excited to talk to you today about this because I was thinking like you and I are kind of in a similar spot in that. And like I wasn't expecting that when I, joined the podcast and like started, kind of engaging that way that like people might recognize me or say things to me at shows or like recognize my friends because I post pictures with them. And, it's been so funny because it's been surprising and it's changed the experience for me and in a positive way, but also like in a different way. So it's like a lot to go to a show now and be kind of like, when you're with friends and they just kind of want to like blend into the like,
yeah,
the ether and be chill and float around and it's different now.
right.
So yeah, it's cool though. I mean, it's really funny how that's changed. I think when you asked me to think about like the best show I ever saw and I started thinking about my favorite experiences, it really felt like there was two categories. It felt like there was like a category of like before the podcast and then like after. And some of the shows were like amazing because I was anonymous and I was in this like universe where like I didn't have to worry about anything else except the music and except the experience. And then some of them were amazing because I am more connected and have more friends and feel like there's like this joyful communion with like people that I meet on the internet and get to meet in real life and how fun that is. And so it's weird. It's like there's kind of, I guess, pluses and minuses on both sides.
Yeah, I mean, your specific like Fish career sounds like there was like a in the 90s, you're like learning who you are, you're growing up,
Mhm.
you're becoming an adult and like figuring out the things that you like. And then, when you get to see them again, you're married, you have a kid, and
Yeah.
now you're totally yourself, or you're a lot more sure of yourself, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
And now you're like in this new you get to have a new relationship with it, even though it's the same group, same community, same thing. It's just a different, I guess, a different like framework for how you're seeing the shows. But I mean, let's with that, like, do you
Yeah.
have some honorable mentions from both eras, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that, you know, one show I did want to talk about, but decided not to choose it as like my best show ever, even though musically it's definitely probably top two is 12:30:19. And
Yeah.
that, MSG show is just like the best, perfect set list, perfect flow, beautiful like ballads that were unique. You've got like Ballad of Curtis Lowe and Karina and like, and then of course this absolutely, well, first in the first set, there's like a stretched out blazon that's just like amazing, but totally overlooked because of this piece of art that happens in the second with Tweezer and the Ruby Waves. I mean, the whole second set is just a masterpiece. And I was on the floor, talk about church. I was literally like
Mm.
on the floor at MSG. I had never been on the floor. I've seen Phish at MSG countless times before that, but I'd never been on the floor. And I was on the
Wow.
floor and I'm short, so I can't see anything. And I was just in the soup, I just felt like I
Yeah.
was feeling the feelings. I didn't try to see anything. Sometimes when I'm like dancing to Phish, I'm a big dancer. Sometimes I like am torn by, oh, I kind of want to watch and see what they're doing, but I just want to feel and dance. And this was like, well, I can't see anything anyway. So I just get to dance. And I was completely in like this other planet. Like I was just taken to another place during that tweezer. And I'll never forget what that felt like. I'll never forget looking at my friend. And this was before I was on the podcast. We didn't know anybody. It was just the two of us at Madison Square Garden. It was like we existed in this own little like secret universe together, and we got to go and have this like religious experience practically on the floor at MSG. And the whole experience was just bliss, and I think that like it was so different from how I go to shows now. And, even just comparing that to another, like one of my favorite shows, which was like, the 12:30 show from this last year, 12:30:22.
Yeah.
Amazing show, closely followed by 12:29 last year. They're both incredible. But that show started, there was like an Osiris Media happy hour at the Bar Moynihan, and we had like Twitter celebs that I got to meet. And, it was just like
Cool.
very like collegiate and fun. And I got to like meet all these people that I've been connecting with. And, and we just had this epic show the night before on the 29th. So there wasn't like pressure about, is the 30th going to be what it usually is? Because the 30th is my favorite night of Phish. 12:30 is my
Yeah.
favorite night of Phish ever. And
Every one of
there's
those shows all the way back is always good. Like,
it's insane.
every single time. Yeah.
It's a holy night. It's insane. So because they played such a creative and just like incredible show on the 29th, nobody was like stressed out about like, oh, is this going to be like a good show tonight? It was like, well, we already won. So like now, they're
Yeah.
just going to like, we already won. And so their vibes were just so high. And then we got to go in and I had a big crew of friends and we just had the best spots and we danced like crazy. And I got to like bring other friends up to our spot. And, I got to see so many people that work at Osiris that I hadn't met yet. And, there was just a lot of like, it felt so connected. I remember walking around like the concourse at the 100 level at MSG and just kept running into people at like the right time. Like, people that you had been trying to connect with, but then you couldn't. All of a sudden you're like, there you are. It was just like one of those nights, and
Yeah.
it was so great. And afterwards we went to like an after party. It was just like so fun. And I felt like it was the exact opposite experience that I'd had on the night in 2019 in the sense of like being on our own and being like super integrated, but they were both like just beautiful for different reasons. So I think there's like this symmetry to that I really appreciate. And I think like now that I'm older too, I appreciate so much more about going to these shows. And that's why I love talking to you and thinking about your experience at these shows because you're younger than me, but I feel like you appreciate it in a way that I didn't when I was younger. And I think that that's like, I was in the room for 12/30, 1997. Like definitely probably the best Phish show that I'll ever see. But I didn't appreciate it like I would now, I mean, I loved it. I know I had like the time of my life. I remember moments in that show that I was like just blown away, but I didn't have, I was hanging out with dumb people. I was like, doing
Yeah.
stupid things. I wasn't like
Yeah.
experiencing it in the moment, like being as present as I would be now. And I think that that's like something that I really appreciate about, getting to see shows now and like having this experience with the podcast because it makes me just like live in the moment in a way that I didn't in the past.
Totally. I think that it's really hard to, I mean, it's easier for me to have this kind of stepped back view of Fish or the Grateful Dead or um, any band like that where I'm not in the middle of their prime. And
Yeah.
when you're in the middle of a prime, you have no idea. You have no idea that you're in the middle of
Yeah.
like you recognize that the shows are great and you recognize that like maybe they're better than the years before, but you have no context for what it's going to mean in 2023, like
Right. Right. Yeah.
I guys like me and like I just talked to LSP and he's a younger guy as well, Ryan Storm, like we
Yeah.
have the full context, we have the full like
Yeah.
we've been able to look everything up and we've got no like nothing attached to it. We can just research it and like it.
Yeah.
Um and so then now when you're seeing the shows, you're like, this one could be special like that one, and I'm gonna watch it like that, or I'm gonna
Yeah.
enjoy
Right.
myself. I'm gonna make sure that I don't like I also when I was younger, I wasn't seeing Fish quite yet, but like some of the bands that I saw or some of the shows that I saw, um, yeah, I was like blackout drunk for them or
Right.
like,
No, exactly. Yeah.
or
Yeah.
like just doing weird stuff or like not really paying attention, just kind of like bopping around the venue with my friend where meanwhile like there was an artist like on one of their first tours that I could have enjoyed,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
now they're
Yeah.
like a famous act and I'm like, yeah, I don't really remember that
No,
show.
exactly. And maybe
Yeah.
that's just youth, right? Like maybe it's just being like super
Yeah.
young and not appreciating it. But that's what I wanted to ask you about because I know you like Goose and I love Goose. And
Yeah.
do you think that it's so some of the best shows I've seen recently are Goose shows. And I
Mhm.
think that every show I see is better than the last one. And the last one was really good. So I'm
Yeah.
wondering, like, is this what people felt like seeing Phish in like 92, 93? Do you think that we're going to appreciate that we are seeing the prime of Goose? Like, I guess it just depends where they end up going, but I just feel like it's such an interesting period in their history. And I'm so like excited to be here for it. And one of the reasons why I'm just so into them right now and find them just thrilling is this like idea of watching them grow and like kind of develop in this way that seems really exciting.
I feel that way totally, and I think there's a little bit of me, and maybe people who are my age that like Fish and like the Grateful Dead that also want that. We really
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like, I mean, man, do I want the Fish '90s, or man, do I want any
Right.
era of the Dead, you know? And so, and me and my friends sit around and talk about that exactly all the time. It's like
Yeah,
almost, like it doesn't matter, so shut up about it. But it's like we'll compare,
it does.
this era of Fish to like 87 through 90, of the Grateful Dead, or we'll compare, like 2018 to now to like 91 through 95 of Fish, like with Goose. And
Yeah.
so and it's not crazy to make that step, like every year, if you listen to Goose, like I was just talking about this with LSP, that you can listen to a drip field from 2019 and listen to a drip field now, and it's like just more confidence, more
Yes.
layered, more experimentation, like all that kind of stuff, in the same way that Fish was accomplishing that in the 90s. Like they really, you listen to 94, there's really not like a ton of like funk pockets, and then you get into like 97, 98, and it's like funk galore, and that's
Yeah,
it. It's just what they're listening to and what they're growing with. And so like I we really hope that that's the case with Goose,
right?
or with literally any band. Like if once you like them, you're like, oh, I hope you turn into the Beatles, and I get to see,
Right.
and I hope I got to see all of the early stuff, and that's also what makes you like get really really into these bands. Like
Yeah.
Goose, when they came through in spring, they didn't hit LA, and I live in LA, and so I was like, I don't have a crew for this. I must drive down to San Diego to see Goose because
Yes.
it's $12, and I'll never be able to do that again. And that felt like, ooh, I'm like getting in on it, like I could have in the '90s with Fish, like it,
Yeah. And I
that
think
kind of
there's
stuff.
something to that, like you said, like, for anybody who's like a 2.0 or 3.0 Fish person, like you didn't get to do that with Fish. So like to get to do it with Goose is like super cool and probably makes you feel like even more connected to the band, right? It's like an opportunity to have that experience and to grow with them. And yeah, I am so into them. I just think their songwriting is just so unbelievable. I think Rick is like once in a generation talent. I This is the first band since Fish that I listen to their music and I pull up their lyrics and I like read the lyrics as I'm listening to the music. It's like
Yeah,
poetry. He's so good at writing in a way that's open for interpretation, which is like what Hunter did so well or what Tom Marshall can
yeah,
do. And that's
totally.
rare. It's really, really hard to do that. And Rick does it. To me, it seems really effortless. And he's super young and he writes really kind of like wise beyond his years lyrics. And
Yeah,
it's just so exciting to be in a space and seeing him kind of like grow. And I think like his tone is continuing to develop and I'm like excited to see where that goes. And he's so incredible. He can just totally shred. And like I love watching like Arabella and watching them play acoustic because then you really can see what Rick can do. Like watching him on the guitar is just like so incredible. And I'm just so into the band in general, their whole kind of vibe of like being so accessible and being open and to their fans and engaging with them and like having fun and building inside jokes the way that Fish does so expertly. It's exciting. And I'm so into their music and like this callback to the indie rock vibes and the 80s pop sensibilities. And like, there's just so much that I just feel like is so listenable and, it's just hitting me right. I saw them at the Peach just a few weeks ago, and that was like
man.
incredible. It was so great, and it was just amazing to see. I've really, like, landed at, like, a lot of incredible shows with them just because of, I think, being in New York too. Like, I saw the 2 Radio City shows, and, like, I got to go to the Mohegan Sun show when they played with Tab, and then the Capitol Theater, and so there's been, like, these just really great shows, and every time I'm like, "Wow, that was the best Goose show I've seen," and then, like, the next time I'm like, "Okay, I think that was the best Goose show I've seen," and, like,
Yeah.
every one, it's thrilling.
Did that Is that how Fish felt in the '90s at all? Like every time you went
Oh,
and saw
yeah,
them?
for sure, for sure. I mean, I think it was, like, different for me in the '90s though because, like, I wasn't now I'm like a more analytical and more,
Yeah.
I'm not like, my friends on the pod or Ryan Storm or anything where I'm not like a Brian Brinkman or a Ryan Storm where I can like remember every jam and I have like can pull this information out of every show. That's just not who I am. I don't remember it. I don't have that kind of
Neither
memory.
neither am I.
No.
Even
Okay.
like my
Thank
favorite
God.
shows, I'm like, I think they did Ruby Waves really long, but other than that, I don't. There's like a hood, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, it's exactly how I am. And like, can you imagine trying to like keep up with these guys on the pod? I'm like, oh my God, I have to do so much research. But it's definitely
This
like,
that's not this podcast. This is the, like, what we
yay.
forget.
Okay, good.
That's not.
Because it's tough. But they have that. And I think that like when I'm not like that, but I listen to shows differently because of knowing them and talking
Yeah.
music with them so much. And I love it. I listen so much more closely. So like in the 90s, I was going to party. Like I wasn't going to like see the best Phish show I could and like write about it in jam base or podcast about it. I was going
Yeah.
to have my mind blown and, you know, do some things and have some fun with my friends. Like I wasn't like I was on tour. Like the reason that I like fell in love with all of these bands is because I love adventure. And
Yeah.
this is what they afforded me. They gave me a reason to drive around the country, and see the Grateful Dead, for a summer when I was 16 and 17. That was what I did. And I loved that sense of like freedom and, you know, connection and just obviously I love the music and I always have and I love the art and the poetry and the lyrics, but I really also just love the adventure. And so
Yeah.
that's what these bands gave to me. And now it's like it's an adventure of a totally different sort.
Well, speaking of adventures, you've been on a lot of adventures.
I
Do you
have.
have a favorite best adventure, best show you ever saw?
I do. And the reason I chose it is because it really epitomizes what this whole thing, why I got into this whole thing and why I love it so much. And the show is not musically the best show, but my experience was so otherworldly and I'm excited to tell you about it. And
Yeah.
also, it indirectly kind of led to what I'm doing now with the podcast, which is kind of cool. So, it all started when I was in college at the University of Arizona.
Mhm.
And this is 1995, and I fell madly in love with a boy. And that winter, he's like, "Guess what we're going to do this summer?" I was like, "What?" He's like, "We're going to go see Phish in Europe."
Whoa.
And yeah, and I was like, wow. Okay. I had never been to Europe. I'd been to Cancun for my spring break when I was 17. And I'd
Cool.
driven to Canada from Michigan to see a play when I was in high school. So I had
Shout out Ryan
never
Storm. Shout out Ryan Storm.
exactly. And it was Toronto. It was.
Cool.
And yeah, I'd never been like off of North America basically. And I was
Yeah.
so excited. And so we flew over and we saw the show in London and then we went to Amsterdam and saw the show at the Melkweg. Both of those shows I could tell huge stories about, especially Melkweg. That Amsterdam show in 96 was crazy. That's when they like smoked up during set break and sat on the edge of the stage and like and it was just didn't finish like half the songs in the second set. Like it was just like a total
I've listened to that show
crazy night.
so many times.
You
So
have?
that's super cool. Yeah.
No way. No
Um,
way.
I just so had you had seen I don't know if you said this. Did you see Fish before this run or was
Yeah,
Europe
yeah.
Fish?
So yeah.
Okay.
Yep,
Yeah.
I saw Phish in 94 for the first time in Grand Rapids, Michigan, in my hometown, at a really small venue. Yep. And then I saw them in Deer Creek in 95 in the summer, which was
Man, what a
amazing.
show.
Oh my God, probably one of
Man, oh
the
man.
best nights of my life too. I like met a boy and we had like the most unbelievable night ever. And it was
Yes.
unforgettable. It was magical night. Like it was just, I'll never forget that night as long as I live. That's a contender for best show ever for sure. But
Oh man.
yeah. So then then I saw a bunch of fall 95 out West. I did like a bunch of the California tour that fall in 95. And then, yeah. And then we went to Europe. And so I saw those two shows in London and in Amsterdam. And then we took the train to Italy. And this is the show I want to talk about because it's this really small show. It was in this town called Sesto Calende. It's like an hour outside of Milan. And a bunch of us, this was our third show now. So after the first show, we kind of figured out, like, as each show went on, we figured out like how many Americans were like actually like on tour, because there weren't that many that were doing all the headlining shows. So there's probably like 50 or 60 of us that were like planning to do every one of the shows. So it was pretty small. And so we would kind of start like running into each other and hanging out and like, joining groups and finding places to stay and stuff. And so we took the train down from Amsterdam and to Milan and got there late at night. And the next train to the small town wasn't until the morning. So we like had to find somewhere to sleep. And so I remember one of our friends like got on like the back of someone's motorbike, this Italian guy, and like drove off. We like didn't see him again until the show the next day. We're like, where have you been? And we were trying to, it was crazy. We were trying to find a place to sleep and we trying to find a campground and we couldn't find one. We had no money, so we couldn't stay in a hotel. So we ended up just like sleeping in the parking lot that night. And we woke up the next morning and got on the first train to go to this little town. And we were so worried about tickets because we were like, I mean, I don't even know how you got tickets in 1996. Like, I don't know like what the process was.
Neither do I. And I have no idea. That's why I'm having you on, because I was not on this tour. I was 4 years old, so I couldn't make it.
Rub it
I
in,
couldn't get
Cam.
out there.
God, you're such a noob. You could have made it happen if you really tried. You probably could have fit in my backpack. Let's be honest.
I was awful on flights, and so you didn't want me.
It's true.
You didn't want me out there.
I definitely did not. I think I drank like 2 Jack and Cokes and like fell asleep on the flight over. But yeah, we were like, how are we going to get tickets? What if it's sold out? Like, we've come all this way. Like, that's going to be so annoying. And so we get there to this town and we walk straight to the venue. It's called La Marna. It's this little like a discotheque. And I tried to look up the capacity. I can't figure it out. I think it was probably around like 400 or something. It was really small. And so we get there and we're like, it was on this river, the Ticino River or something. And it's this big river that runs through, and the club is like right on the riverbank. So we walk up there and we're like, this place is pretty sweet. And we get in line to wait, and we wait like an hour, and then the box office opens, and we were third in line. And my boyfriend and I, we get ticket like, okay, I guess there'll be no problem for tickets tonight. And so we buy tickets, and then we like walked into town and we bought like a jug of wine. And I had never had wine before. I was 19. And we were like passed a jug of wine around. And right next to the club was a playground, because what else is next to a club in Italy but a playground? I don't know. And so we're all like, this is perfect. We'll set up our tents here. So we set up our tents, and like we were camped out in the playground, and we were like drinking wine. And then like the guys from the band show up, and they're like loading in, and everybody's hanging out in back of the venue. And to the side of the venue, there's like these like kind of like bleachers, stone bleachers. And Mike was hanging out there, like singing. He had his guitar, and everybody had a guitar. I didn't know there were so many guitars on this Phish tour, but all of a sudden I have pictures and everybody has like a guitar. I'm like, where'd you get these things? And we were playing Dead songs with Mike, and then singing. And then Phish and Paige played like so much chess on this tour. So they had like chess set up like back, behind there, and we're playing chess. And Trey was like always off, like getting like a massage, or like, his back adjusted, or that was what he was doing. And so he wasn't hanging out with us. And
come on, Big Red.
I know. Come on, hang out. But yeah, so it was really amazing spending that day, because it was like, I kept thinking at the time, like, they were playing huge venues in the States by this point, 96, and this was a chance for them to play really small venues and have fun. And, we talk a lot. We did an HF Pod episode for 40 series when we're looking back at each year of the band, and we talked about 1996. And I think it's such an interesting year to talk about, because it's in, the valley in between these two just like huge epic years of Phish, both of which sound completely different. And they had to like reinvent themselves through 96. And they were probably struggling with that as they've, we've reached the mountaintop, right? We've played probably one of our best shows ever, the 31st at MSG on 1995. Like, they've reached it, and then it's like, what do you do now? you know? And so I think 96 is really interesting because they have to reinvent their sound, but they're also having to play really big arenas in the States and stuff. And it's like, how can you reinvent your sound when you're playing these enormous places? So it's interesting because they come to Europe but they don't do it like they did in 97 to like workshop sounds. It seems like they just came to like party and like blow off steam and like have some fun and play some music, open for Santana, you know, like just
Yeah.
it was chill. It was like maybe their last chance to do that because even their 97 Europe tours were pretty professional and those shows were like sick and they were really like delivering on a high level. And clearly they had a new sound, you know, after like doing the Talking Head stuff and at the end of 96 and they were ready to bring that. But I think that 96 was like that last like gasp of like that little band that was, you know?
Yeah.
And that's how that tour was. Like they would hang out with us all the time before the show. They were like super chill. Trey like was walking across the bridge over the river and some kids were like looking like they were going to jump and Trey's like if you jump like I'll play whatever you want. And some idiot was like play Makasupa. Like out of all the songs that you could have Trey play.
You blew it.
I mean, come on, anything. Like I was just like, what? Anyway, he played it that night because the kid jumped. And so there was like a lot, just like this very relaxed like vibe. And so that whole show, like leading up to that show, hanging out and back with them and just being in this idyllic, like Italian riverside town, you know, drinking wine. Everybody was like really sparkly that night. The people and everybody seemed to like be on the same thing in the show. All the Americans were. And
Yeah.
then there was this like influx of these like Italian men from the neighborhood who came to see the show. And that was like the vibe. It was like Americans on tour and then like probably like 200 like local Italian men who were just like, hey, hey, hey. And you can hear them like in the show doing
Yeah.
that. It's like
Yeah.
so great, you know? And there was just this weird vibe that like worked and it was so fun. And I have all these pictures from that night and all the pictures have this kind of like cloudy, mythic, like disposable camera from the 90s vibe. It's just so
Oh,
dreamy, you know?
it's like what photographers right now are like trying to recreate. They like get a bunch of
Yeah,
filters to try to like make it look like that picture, but you actually have those pictures.
I know.
Cool.
Everybody's like, oh, what were you like into photography? I'm like, this is a disposable. I brought like 3 disposable cameras on that trip and just like cranked them out, kept them like they were gold. But like, it was just the show, you know, it's a really, there's a fun Down with Disease that opens the second set. Like the show is 1996, right? So there's some good moments. There's some like flubbing. There's some like whatever. But, you know, it's just one of those shows that was so special to me because it was like this experience was so something I could only have had following this band around, you know, and I was in love and I was in Europe for the first time and I was like seeing this band I loved and in an intimate space, you know, I had only seen them like in pretty big venues. And so this was just so incredible to see them in this like tiny room and, you know, being a foot away from them, you know, and it was just a totally magical experience. And then during set break, it was super hot in the venue. It was July in, you know, Italy. And during the set break, they had like garage doors on the back of the venue. And so they opened it up and everybody just ran out and went swimming.
Oh man. This
I
is like a
know.
dream that I had. This isn't a real show. This is like a dream that happened in my sleep.
Exactly. And then like when we're swimming, I remember we're like swimming in set break and we look over and I just see Fishman's dress like floating up. He was in the water and like we were all just like, oh my
No
God. Like,
way.
yeah, everybody was just like, it was just so cool. I remember thinking to myself, like, that dress is going to be so wet. Like that was like
Yeah.
what I was worried about. But I remember just like
Yeah.
looking at my boyfriend, like, yeah, like, is this real life? Is this really happening? And I remember him looking at me and just saying like, and we still have second set. And I was like, oh my God, like that was just,
So
it was so
it's
amazing.
you can't even it's like unthinkable to have that sort of an experience, especially with Fish. And like you said, like you of course we're never gonna have that experience again, but like specifically in the time that they were in their career, you were never gonna have that. I
Yeah.
mean, they were just about to take over the world, you know, and destroy America. You were never gonna have that like 300 people in a tiny discotheque swimming in the swimming with them at set break, that's never gonna happen again, and so, wow, I mean, that's an it was there like a yeah, I know that you said that you weren't, like, super analytical at that time and you weren't, you were there to party and things like that, but did you have, like, sort of the knowledge of, like, Fishman and Trey going over to Italy and having that experience when they were in college and, living on the street? Was that kinda on your mind at all? Because it feels to me like such a fishy, like, full circle experience, you know?
Yeah, totally. I don't remember if I knew that about them. Like, I don't know if I knew that they wrote, like the songs that they wrote on like the beach in it. I don't know if I knew that. Now I know all those stories, but I don't know if I knew it then. I might have. I was actually
Yeah,
trying to think of like how we even knew about this tour was going to happen. I don't know if it was like the Doniak Chevice or like what it was that like how we figured this out, but it definitely, I think that you bring up a good point in that I'm probably pretty sure that Trey and Fish were really remembering all of that when they were
yeah,
there. I like a lot of the shows, like one of the shows in Nuremberg, like it started like an hour late because Fishman like wouldn't give up this chess game in the parking lot. It was like they were very much like living that, probably thinking a lot about that and like how different it was for them now, right? That there was a lot of pressures on them by 96 to deliver, and they had to reinvent themselves. And I think that's kind of like what's going to be exciting comparing it to the Goose trajectory is like, can Goose continue to evolve, right? Can they continue to like
yeah,
reach heights and then reinvent themselves when they have to? And that's like the test of like I think they can, but that's the test of like a really long running band, right? Is like you have to have this, there's such a pressure to continue, especially a band that improvs like this, like, and has
yeah,
people that listen like as closely as we do, right? Like we listen so closely, and that's so much pressure, and we expect greatness. I keep thinking about that when I hear like these Goose shows come out and everybody's like jam of the year, jam of the year. I'm like, these poor guys, like they have to deliver a fucking jam of the year like every two shows,
every
or
single time,
it's just
yeah,
like, oh my god, like the pressure, it's enormous. And I think Fish was really feeling that, and I think it's so. And of course, as the 90s went on, that just continued to grow and grow and grow. And because I've said this before, and I really feel like it's true, it's Fish's own fault that we expect so much of them because they continue to deliver. They just do. They continue to do a spring tour run like you just saw in, out
yeah,
west. That's just phenomenal in their 40th year. That's why we expect them to be so great. And I think that's why Goose is exciting, because we expect them to be great because they are, And so I think that it's a lot of pressure though. And I think that this tour in 96, this European tour, was like just a chance for them to like blow off steam, open for Santana, play some small venues. I mean, they only did 6 headlining shows this whole summer tour, and in Europe, and they were small. Like there was, there was the Melkweg, I guess, and the Shepherd's Bush, which are big, but the rest were like, I guess the Markthal in Hamburg but it's small venue, but kind of a storied place. But the Markthal, and then they play a show in Nuremberg, and then this one in Italy. So like not much, maybe there were only 5. I think I saw 6 because I saw them open for Santana, which was crazy because Paige gave us tickets because he saw us trying to break into the show. And like, so the whole tour was just like magic. And it's, to bring it kind of full circle, the reason why it kind of led to me being how I'm involved in the scene now is because during quarantine, I was listening to lots of podcasts, and I was listening to a lot of HF Pod. And, I've always been a fan of HF Pod, but like I was really digging in deep because had a lot of time, and I was just listening to, they did an episode on this Europe tour, and they were like, we don't, I think RJ is like, we don't know anybody who went on this tour. And like, I've always wanted to hear what it was like. And so if you went on this tour, like, let us know. And so I reached out and was like, I was on that tour. And it was, and I have pictures and stories, and, I'd love to show them and talk to you guys about it. And so they had me come on and do like an episode that we ran in like April of 2020. And so that was the first time I was ever on the podcast. And then after that, I just begged them to be on, like, until they finally let me come on for good. But
all
yeah,
right.
so this tour is kind of like how, it started, like how I ended up getting in contact with them too. So I'm really like appreciative for that.
Man, and you had already had your Phish credentials before this tour, but I mean, if anything stamped it, it's definitely this tour. I mean, no one's got that one on you. I'm sure there's a lot of people who are like, I saw this, I saw that, but not a lot of people who have that 96 Europe tour on you.
Well, thanks. It's good for stats for sure. For sure.
It is good for stats. Yeah, it's so cool to think about, you know, Fish and Trey being in Italy during that time in college. It seemed like just a complete creative time for them, like a building block. And just they got to experiment, they got to make their new songs. And then so by the time you see them in 96, they are, those songs that they made and that they had fun creating together and shaping, those are now like anthems that people want to see, and they're expected, and there's stickers, and there's, t-shirts and all that kind of stuff. And so and when you put something out and you're done with it, I mean, Fish is never really done with any of their songs because they improvise and they build off of them constantly, and they find new ways to jam within them. But yeah, that had to be, um, we're so lucky that Fish has had so many breakthrough moments like the Grateful Dead did. Obviously the comparisons run deep between those two bands, but I think one of the most apt comparisons is just, when you listen to the Dead, they keep breaking through, they keep breaking through, even when they add new members, which is something Fish never had to do. Kind of, thank God. But
Right? I know.
that would suck. There's just
So lucky for that. Yeah.
some new dude just like playing piano. That would be awful.
No.
But they, Fish keeps breaking through, and they still keep breaking through. I still feel like there are things that happen now that are like, man, this is completely different than 2019, and you guys are clearly interested in this new aspect of your sound. Is there uh, between the two eras? It seems like you've seen a lot of shows in the two eras, 1.0 and 3.0. What I mean, do you feel the same? Or is there?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's what's so incredible about Fish is like, if you listen, let's say to the 12/30/19 show, it opens with Wilson, which is what they opened with 25 years before the first night they ever played at MSG, right? In 12/30/1994. And so they're making a historical nod, right? And that's something they do so well is that I think like I was talking to someone about this recently about like, the reason that they are not a nostalgia act is because they know they are like, they can like comment on it and be like, yes, I'm nodding back to this. And I think that that's a really like apt description of that, because they can say like, we know we've been around a long time and we know you want to hear Wilson. And so we're going to play it in a moment that says to you, like, remember when we did this? Remember when we came to MSG for the first time in 1994? Any band headlining Madison Square Garden is something you want to do, right? They're
Yeah.
nodding back to that, and they're opening with Wilson, and you listen to that Wilson, it's so powerful and authoritative, and it's like exactly what you want Wilson to be. And it's like Trey saying like, I still belong here. I still deserve
Yeah.
to be opening up at Madison Square Garden on the best night of the year, and I'm still going to smoke this place. And then, the next song they go into, the final hurrah, is a Kazvat Vox song, which is like new, right? Which is like
Yeah.
a newer song, that they are saying like, I can play a song that I played 25 years ago, that I wrote 35 years ago, 40 years ago, and I can, follow it up with a song I wrote last year for a surprise Halloween set where I did this super weird thing. Like this is why they are the band they are, because they can have this like, they're still evolving and growing. And like, I think that it's so, to me, Fish is the best American band ever because of this. They have been able to continue to evolve and change their sound and stretch themselves and work hard and work through challenges that every band has, but they have been able to meet the challenge and like rise every time. And it's just,
Yeah.
I don't even know how they still do it. And like, it's so crazy, because I think that's a lot of the times why there's like this, like, I don't know, this like rift between some people who don't want to like Goose because people are like, oh, they're the next Fish, or it's like,
Sure.
we don't have to own Fish. We don't have to like be worried about them or anybody taking their spot, because like there is going to be a time when they aren't playing the way that they play now, but they're still playing that way in some incredible, for some reason. I don't know why. There's a million reasons, but I think that like that ownership and that sense of like worry, like Phish is still, we don't have to worry about them. Like they are literally the best at this. They're the
Yes.
best, hands down. And there's nothing like what they do. And it will take a long time for any band to like prove that they can do what Phish did. And I think that like there is this sense of like seeing the bands in totally different eras. And I would even say like 4.0 seems totally different than 3.0 too already too. You know, there's
Yeah, I
this,
would say.
right? There's this like renewed sense of optimism. There's just this drive to, you know, look at texturing and layering in a different way, you know, look at synthesizers, use all these pedals and effects. There's all this different, just constant new love and light shit from Trey, which I love. You know, there's this introspectiveness to his like lyrics that he continues to grow with as he gets older and wiser. And like, those are things that he wasn't doing in 3.0, especially in the beginning of 3.0, maybe more towards the end. But I think it's incredible when you think about this band. And when I have opportunities like this, thanks to you, to sit and think about this and like reflect on like what it was like to see them in Italy when I was 19 and what it's like to see them at, you know, the unspecified age I am now. Like, it's amazing, you know, it's amazing.
20 years later.
Yeah.
Still
20
great.
years later.
Oh man.
Exactly.
Meg, you're gonna make me cry. That was
Aw.
it's such a beautiful way to put that. And yeah, it's so cool to watch artists be excited about the art that they make. And
Yes.
unfortunately, that's kind of rare. It's fun to see someone when they first, you know, headline stadiums and things like that, and then sometimes you don't get to grow past that, and that's okay. That's still a great achievement, but to watch, you know, Phish set an example for all of the bands that are now like my age, like the Gooses and the you know, Billy Strings and like King Giz. I know that they're not like jam band people, but you know, Trey sets an example for all of these bands to like keep finding joy in things. You know, even if you don't like his new Love and Light shit or whatever, that's Trey finding joy in the music that you love to listen to. And so that's the only reason. RJ tweeted this one time. He's like, the only reason Phish is still good is because they're putting out new stuff. That's the secret. And um,
Absolutely.
so thank God they're still growing, like they did the 90s, and you confirmed it. And so if anyone says that they're not, I'll be like, Meg said. Meg said they're still
Well,
growing.
then they'll
So
believe it. Then they'll believe it. You know, it's
like,
true. And
oh
I think, oh, they'll be like, oh, well, Meg said it. Yeah. And they'll be like, first of
yeah,
all, who's Meg? That's their first question. But after that, then
right,
they'll know. Then they'll know. Yeah.
right, right.
But I think that's so true. If you think about like a lot of like hip hop artists, like their first albums are like, they have so much to say and they're like so pent up and they like release this like masterpiece of an album that's just like so like intense and moving. And then it's like they run out of angst because they like get money and they like have an easier life and they don't have things to say. And I think that's like what, yeah, Trey continues to find things to say. And like, thank God. I'm here for it.
Yeah. I think there are a lot of genres, a lot of bands, a lot of artists in general who would love to have the opportunity that a band like Phish or an artist like Trey has to keep growing within your stuff. I'm sure, you know, as an artist, you would love to put out your album 4 times and be like, well, we changed a couple little things. And actually, I kind of wanted to do this. And, you know, because you grow and you're
Exactly.
different and all that stuff. And luckily, the bands that we go and see, they get to grow within their stuff all the time, which is what I'm there for. And is what I'm listening super close for, like you said. Are you growing? I'm listening really hard to see if you're growing. Okay,
And if
good, you're
not,
growing.
I'm going to be talking about it on the internet.
I will be on Twitter talking about the lack of growth immediately. This is how I tweet.
This is how you
My
tweet?
keyboard.
Okay, cool. I didn't know. You know, I'm not that good at Twitter, so now I know this is how you do it because I've just been doing it like this, but I guess that's wrong.
You really, if you're getting mischievous, you really gotta.
Head down. Okay, got it.
That's right.
That was the best show ever. That was the best show ever. That was the best show ever. That was the best show.
Man, there was some fucked up stuff in there. Yeah, what the fuck was that about?
Ever.
Okay, so that was a little bit of music from Jesus and Fartfinger, but also a really great conversation with Megan Glionna. We had so much fun recording this podcast. We could have gone for another hour. We could have gone for another 2 hours talking about the stuff that we were on. But we'll just have to have her on again in the future. If you want more Megan content, you got to follow her on everything that she's on. She's on Instagram at the Megan Dance. She's on Twitter at the Megan Dance. RIP Twitter. Uh, She's got great content on there. You can also follow her on her podcasts, Helping Friendly Podcast and the Things of Gold podcast on Osiris's network, keeping it in the family. Um, Had a lot of fun, but until next time, have a good show.